Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours, where we've been answering your media and tech-related production questions every single day since, I think it was March 25th, 2020. In fact, we're very close to our 2000th show. That happens on Sunday. So welcome to this one. Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia is our reader today. Alexander, what have we got?
First question this morning is coming in from Vic Hernandez in Springfield, Missouri. Are there any disadvantages to using a 40-inch or any other size 4K TV as my desktop's computer main display?
Let's see what Jason Bache has to say. Jason?
I mean, there are, but nothing that should really dissuade you from doing it. You know, in general, a larger display or a TV is much less expensive. The color accuracy is not going to be quite right. The power can be annoying. It always wants to be connected to Wi-Fi. Other than that, no. I mean, I do this all the time. There is a screen directly to my right with a quadplex on it. This is a 43-inch display that gives me 4 up for my cadre of Macs, and it works beautifully. And I don't think it's really designed to be a computer monitor, but I don't care. I use it.
Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, if you're doing any type of color correction or anything like that, especially older TVs, I have a 43 sitting right to the left of me that I use as my Mac screen when I need to see what's going on. But I would never use it for, like I said, anything like color grading. However, if you are looking into something like that, you might want to take a look at some of the newer Samsungs, some of the newer Sony machine, basically the ones that also are meant for gaming. So they're high-end color, high-end hertz. So you can plug into there, and you could do some editing from there, and really see the colors that you're trying to get into whatever you're doing. But if it's an everyday thing like Jason does, you can pretty much set it up and then use it that way. Like I said, I do that.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I have the same monitor that Jason just showed, and I have it in the quad display setup as well. Now, the color, as others have mentioned on TVs, just isn't as accurate as some of the purpose-built, like the Asus. And let's see, is Alexander on this question? He might be able to talk a little bit about his fancy Asus ProArt display, where you get the RGB values that are just dead on. So if you are doing things like color correction for video or for photos, it's nice to have a real monitor. The downside of these larger 40-inch displays is, to me, it's the mouse travel. It's just like, it seems like forever away. And unless you have some kind of little app that lets you pop over to a certain spot with a keystroke, or, you get fast if you have to. A friend of mine, my old boss in LA, when I went to visit him, he has 2 40+ inch displays, but he does a lot of coding. And so seeing all the code is super helpful for him, because he's doing a lot of copying and pasting and looking, and like when he does an HTML change, he wants to see the live page pop up immediately. So there is a big benefit in those kind of environments where you need to see multiple things at the same time. But like here, I like the LG 43-inch quad, just to have 4 different computers on that same one display. And then I have various monitors for other tasks.
Courtney Gooden.
Yeah, for a 40-inch, guy hit on one of my problems. You have to have a bigger mouse pad, because you've got 4 full 1080p screens up on that 40-inch or a 50-inch monitor that's a TV. You're going to be mousing. You have to turn up the ballistics on your mouse so that it travels further with a little bit of movement. Then you have to get into the fine mouse control. Then once you get to the window that you want to click on, there's that problem. There are advantages, because most of them have built-in speakers, so you don't have to have external speakers for just listening to YouTube videos or hearing notification sounds, things like that. A couple of disadvantages: if you're a gamer, the refresh rate is usually at about a 120, and you're not going to get much higher than that for the 40-inch. And the problem is latency, because a lot of televisions have this frame interpolation built in to make 24-frame movies look smoother, and that causes a pretty good deal of latency. And unless you have a game mode, so check that monitor and see if it has a game mode, which removes all the internal processing that the underpowered little GPU that's inside the monitor is trying to interpolate frames with. And that way it'll improve the latency. But I found that television monitors have much better off-axis viewing angles than most computer monitors did, because the computer monitors were higher resolution and were designed slightly different before the IPS technology came in. And, TV monitors had a much wider viewing angle because normally they're viewed in a room full of people, and it would look funny if you get off axis. So actually, they maintain a little better color accuracy if you're off axis, and you will be off axis if you have a big screen and you're sitting in the sweet spot. So the screen on the left and the right are going to be off at about 45 degrees.
Jason Bache.
Yeah, and with respect to what Jeffrey said, I have repeatedly bought the best colorimeter I can, and I have really great monitors that are my primary display. But at the end of the day, it's really hard to beat an iPhone and an iPad Pro. So I actually end up using that as my final proof instead of the monitors that are in front of me. That and scopes are really all I need.
Alexander Knight.
Yeah, and everything everyone said, and I do want to echo what Guy said about the Asus ProArt series. They actually have quite a wide variety of different sizes. I have the 24-inch 1080p models, which I find good, but I did buy them because the fact that they are Calman calibrated, color calibrated from the factory, and they look fantastic. So I do tend to check on those things for any kind of accuracy. I have that 43-inch LG quad display that a lot of people like, and it's cool that you can run stuff in different quadrants on the display, but it is not very color accurate, and I do find it frustrating because I also use it as a confidence monitor, and I've been working on making changes and practicing creating my own LUTs for my camera, and I keep forgetting that when I'm looking at myself in that thing, that's not really 100% what I really look like. So I have to check it on the other monitor on the ProArt display to my left. So that's something to think about. If I were to do it all over again, I would probably just replace this 43-inch quad and just put all ProArt displays. They also, just to mention too, if you are looking for something to edit on, they also have a specific one for filmmaking and video that's a little bit larger, that's 32 inches, and this particular one will do 6K and supports Thunderbolt, and it comes with a sunshade on it. So they're pretty expensive. Well, not expensive if you look at what Sony charges for, say, a professional color accurate monitor for like a reference monitor, but they have some pretty good options as well.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, just to wrap it up too, there's another thing that we haven't talked about is the crispness of the aliasing of text. If you're doing things like if you're on this computer all day, it may be worthwhile to go into the Apple store and go look at what a proper Apple XDR display looks like for $1,500 or whatever it is. It's pretty amazing. And if you're spending a lot of time in front of a display and you compare it versus a computer, you'll notice that text, if you were to go into the Apple store, then go over to a Best Buy and go look at a TV and look at text, you'll see what I'm talking about. There's just this softness to it, and it can drive you nuts. Subconsciously, you don't realize that you're processing this additional, you're trying to sharpen it with your brain, essentially, and so it could cause fatigue. So look at some of these other dedicated displays instead of just using a TV as a computer monitor.
As you can imagine, there is a tremendous amount of discussion in the chat about this, people weighing in a lot of things. Mickey said in one that I was specifically interested in, he said, +1 lower refresh rate, support on TVs, lack of DisplayPort, V-Sync and G-Sync are major downsides to TVs over monitors. I will note that Apple did solve one thing, and that is the managed color pipeline that they've kind of re-architected ever since OS X was displayed, which doesn't mean that what you see on any Apple device is going to be perfectly accurate broadcast standard stuff. It just means that when you see something on one iPad or iPhone or Apple computer monitor, anybody looking at those same devices anywhere else in the world will see exactly the same thing. So that managed color pipeline can be a benefit if you're delivering primarily to Apple screens, or if you want the large body of Apple users to see something the same way you do on your desktop. All right, all that said, actually, I should do this now. We're taking your questions all the time. You can ask questions, chat about questions, vote on the questions. Mukana is our Q&A system in the back, and if you want to get in that, if you're not in that up to this point, it really does make the show more enjoyable, I think, because of what I was just talking about, that chat that's constantly going on, people adding more information in the back end. If you want to get into it, go to officehours.global/join. We'll send you an email within a day or two. And once you've done that, you can get into the system and not just ask, but vote on the questions. And of course, we get to the questions that gather the most votes each day. We get to them faster and generally spend more time on them, just like this first question. So thank you for all of your votes and for being in the Mukana system, officehours.global/join. Next question.
This question's coming in from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. Would the two USB-C ports on the ATEM Mini Extreme Iso allow for the user to ISO record and send program multiview out to a computer simultaneously?
Guy Cochran's going to help us out here. Guy?
Yeah, you bowled this one right up my alley because I just have it right here already all set up for you. So here's the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO. And if you have the latest firmware update, there was some time from the beginning when this was first released to one of the firmware updates where you now have a webcam out and it allows you to choose multi-view and program view, preview, or any single camera display. So if I jump over to QuickTime Player, you could now see that the little pop-up has an input for a camera input as Blackmagic design. So that helps answer that question. As far as other outputs, you have your normal 1 and 2, and I do have my second USB set up to record, so I can go ahead and hit record, and that starts ISO recording. So one USB is hooked up to, you can see this 1 terabyte Samsung drive, and I could stop that recording. And you could also see that the other way of sending things out is via a Zowie box. So I actually use my output to go convert to NDI, so then I can pick up my multi-view anywhere on the network, and anybody else can too. So there's another little trick. One other trick if you're doing this kind of stuff and you don't have an Extreme, or if you need another output, is to use this OBSBot UVC to HDMI converter, and that'll give you another output as well.
Jason Bache?
I don't even know what I could add to that. That was perfect.
Yeah, well done. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington here on our panels asking, IBC, what booths do you have interest in this year?
Courtney's going to take a shot at it. I don't know if have we gotten the maps out? Are they out? Or does everybody know what booths are where?
Well, here's a map. The place I'd like to visit would be this accelerator zone, the IBC Accelerator number 14 here, which is the Future Tech stage and AWS and NVIDIA's innovation stage. So, you might get a chance to see what NVIDIA is going to be putting up for all your AI needs this year, and for all your robotics processors. So there is a map. It doesn't seem to be nearly as big. Maybe it's a much bigger building. I haven't been there. So maybe each of these areas are huge, the size of the Las Vegas Convention Center or something. But it doesn't seem to be that much stuff to take a look at. But I'd look at the future areas, the blue stuff down there, and that looks like that would be interesting. Are you going, Guy? Yes, Guy.
I'm not attending this year. I would love to. There's a few things from LiveView that look like they're going to be announced. High Vision. I'm just looking through my emails trying to figure out if I was boots on the ground where I would go. It's one of those things where the fun of it is exploring, as we've seen on Office Hours when we've done show coverage, to kind of wander around and be like squirrel and go over there and go check out something. Next thing you know, you're discovering something new that you could use or let other people know about in their production. So I was just wondering if anything stood out that was really like, well, Canon's new camera. I think that's one with the competitor to the Sony FX line. I think that Canon C50 is going to be one to watch if it comes out in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. So that's one that I would love to see in person before saying I'm going to commit to buying one of those, because I love the color of Canons.
You're in Amsterdam, and that's major amounts of fun. You can get yourself a bicycle and wander around outside the Rye to your heart's content and bicycle down some canals. Lots of notes in there. Kikadoki in the note said, I really want to visit DPA and Austrian audio mic booths and wonder if Voyage audio is there as well. So, there's sound, there's cameras, there's all the standard production stuff. Jeffrey Bowers, you wanted to get in on this.
So you might want to ask this question 24 hours from now, because today I have at least 3 different press conferences that I'm going to be part of. And of course, they're probably going to be announcing what they're going to be announcing at IBC. So, but I can't talk about it until that happens or until I get the okay.
Yeah. There's this thing called embargo with press releases. You'll sometimes get them a week ahead of time, but they'll give you an embargo date, and it's very bad form. Plus, you can get removed from lists if you break embargoes on information like that. So stay tuned here. We'll, I'm sure, be covering it. In fact, we're going to try to get some of our European participants from the show to ping in at some point from what's happening at IBC. So this will be one hub of information on all the press releases and things like that come out. Next question.
This question is coming in from Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin, USA. Adobe Premiere for iPhone will be available on September 30th. Pre-orders are available now. How will you add this app to your workflow?
And Jeffrey, what do you want to say about this?
Yeah, just adding a little bit more. I actually got the email right before office hours started, and basically what it's going to be a fully functional Premiere. It doesn't say Premiere Pro. It just says Adobe Premiere for video editor, which is it's actually, you know, just like with these other programs, a really great idea where you can start once you've recorded that whatever on the phone. You can start to do the editing. You can then switch over to the desktop when you're done. It's going to bring in a whole bunch of AI tools. So I'm really hoping that it's going to have things like editing via the transcript and things like that. Being able to bring in stickers, being able to bring in B-roll assets through AI, and then, like I said, you could either finish it on the computer or you could send it out for phone. So if you're looking for something vertical video wise, that would probably be very functional. And then, of course, they're touting that it's going to be a great screen recording tool. So the audio, I'm wondering what they're going to be doing with the audio on that. So I can't wait to see what happens there.
I'm sure there will be a lot of coverage. There's so many people using Adobe subscriptions that it will be, I'm sure, a product of great interest. We'll see how it maps down to the small screen. I do know that when I'm trying to do some editing on iMovie or Final Cut or anything else on those small screens, it gets to be a bit of a challenge. But when you need to do it, you need to do it. So we'll see. Next question.
This one's from David Brady in New York City, New York, USA. I used to use Fluid to make site-specific browser apps. Are there any current or modern alternatives?
I'm not sure I know what Fluid is, David, and nobody else on the panel for today seems to have raised a hand, so I'm not sure if we know much about that. Site-specific browser apps. It sounds like a fascinating thing. Unfortunately, if we're going to strike out on this today, that means, let's see, I can't tell whether, I don't think you came in off of the QR code system, which means that this will come back to you and maybe, oh, wait. At the last minute, Alexander Knight has raised his hand, so he must have some knowledge of this. Alexander?
You know, I did used to use that, and I completely forgot about it. I don't know what that says about Fluid, but yes, it used to be very handy to be able to turn a web page into a localized, like an app, basically, that you'd run on your desktop. But I can't remember why I stopped using it. It might have been memory usage or something like that on that. But I don't know of a current day replacement for that. And to be honest with you, I know a lot of people that used to use it that don't use it anymore. So maybe that's just not something that, maybe it's just fallen out of popularity. So I don't have a good answer. But I used to use it, and it was useful at one point in time.
There's so many tools out there. Because of the audiobook work that I'm doing, we needed a little tiny, simple casting website where people could come in and get information. So one of my colleagues recommended this little software program called CARD, C-A-R-R-D, or is it C-A-A-R-D? Something like that. Or maybe it's C-A-R-D-D. In any case, it's got a double letter in there. And it's the simplest thing in the world. Even I could figure out how to use it and put up a website. And it took me maybe a half an hour to get the basics down. It's a web-based little tiny app builder for just simple things. You can't do anything really complicated, but it was perfectly functional, and that site has been up and has been helping with casting for about a month now. And it's just, there's so many useful small tools. I don't know whether Fluid is in the same kind of thing or whether it's just whether it's not, David, but good luck, and let us know once you figure out whether or not it meets your needs, how other people might be able to use the same thing. Don't forget, we have other shows, and Thursday, because today is Thursday, this is the night for David Paskin and The Rundown. David's been hosting that panel, taking a deep dive into the why behind the latest tech. It's a really enjoyable hang. I've been on a couple of times, and I have to admit I've really enjoyed playing with that community every time I've been in there. So if you're interested, that's 6 p.m. tonight, The Rundown with David Paskin. All right, next question.
Paul Vahos in Austin, Texas is asking, how does office hours embed their audio meter into the after hours 24/7 Zoom meeting, and how do you use it? It's down as of last night.
Guy Cochran knows a lot about this, so I'm going to toss it to him. Guy?
Yeah, our friend Hasmuk and his team in Africa actually made a really great tutorial video. For those of you who are listening in and not watching, there's some meters that we have in the back end and in after hours. So if you're ever heading into a meeting and you're wondering if you're too quiet or too soft, there is Zoom's built-in tool, which if you go down to the little audio caret and hit audio settings, scroll down to microphone, you'll see some meters, and it gets you in the ballpark. But having proper meters, I don't know if they could cut to it in this show, but basically it gives us LUFS meters. And if you do a search on the Office Hours website, officehours.global, just type in WLM, you'll find this video which tells you the tools to use. It's Audio Hijack, OBS, and then the WLM plugin. So this isn't cheap to do because for one, it's going to tie up a computer. For another, you need to buy these things. And this Vimeo video is embedded when you find in the search box under WLM. You can find this video, and it basically walks you through all the steps of creating the loop or the audio hijack programming, and then using Zoom to push it in to a meeting. So this is so that it monitors anybody else that's in there. And if you don't want to mess with all this, it is in after hours. Usually it's working, and you can just I'll use it I use it every once in a while. I'll just before a meeting, if I want to double check myself, I'll jump into the meeting, do a quick mic check, then jump out. So it's available 24/7 for anybody who's interested in just checking your levels. And don't be surprised if you start talking and somebody opens up their camera and turns on and starts talking to you. That's what after hours is about.
That's the magic of after hours. Alexander Knight.
Yeah, I use another app from another manufacturer that does the same thing, but I like the Ulean app. I think it's .co is the website. Anyways, it's just another loudness meter. I do the same thing. I run it on a dedicated computer, and then basically the HDMI output of that computer goes into the ATEM, and then that ATEM goes into the Zoom meeting, and it has a different interface. I just run it in full screen mode, and see if I can cut to it, and it looks like that. So it's got a different look, but it accomplishes the same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, if programmed correctly, meters are meters, and it should give you a realistic LUFS readout of what you're doing. So, next question.
This one's coming in from Jeff Veely in Henderson, Texas. What is the best way to prepare for a video shoot to prevent drift when recording audio with a RodeCaster Duo and video with an iPhone 15 Pro and DJI Osmo Pocket 3?
Courtney Gooden's going to help you out here. Courtney?
Yeah, the best way would be to dump all those things and get real professional cameras that have reference in on them so that you could gen-lock them together. Otherwise, because the iPhone 15 Pro, the DJI Osmo Pocket 3, and the RodeCaster Duo all have crystal oscillators in them. But first make sure all three things are set to the same frame rate. And the problem is a lot of times they'll say 30 frames when they mean 29.97. Or so if you set it to 30 frame, is it running 30 or is it running 29.97? You may not ever know. And is it during drop frame at the 29.97 to bring it back to 30 frames? The problem is all three of these different crystal oscillators are running on their own, and they're not temperature compensated, so they're going to drift over time. And since there's no way of coordinating a sync signal between those three disparate methods of recording, there's no way to prevent drift over a long period of time. You're just going to have to go in your editing program and maybe have the host just every now and then go, oh my gosh, to put everything back in sync again. So you're just going to have to pull up a few frames here and there after they start to drift. because without a common sync signal between any of those recording media, they're not going to stay in sync for more than maybe 20 minutes or so. And then you're going to start to see the drift between the two of them or three of them.
Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, the editing is where you're going to really shine on putting all this together. If I was to use this as a primary, secondary device thing, I would probably trust the iPhone 15 Pro over the DJI Osmo Pocket 3. And more to the point, with the Osmo Pocket records to a micro SD card. It's mostly about that micro SD card. I've seen some high-end micro SD cards get put into things like the Pocket 3, and then they just create junk for video. And then others where you put it in and they work perfect. In fact, I got one device that I've got a high-end SD card in there, and it just keeps coming back on the screen saying that this isn't a high-end card. So you want to test those cards. You want to make sure you have fresh cards in there. Don't use something that you've used for years, and be able to put that in there. And then with the iPhone 15, I'd really move it over to something like the Blackmagic app, where you can have a little bit more control over what you're doing with your video. So when it's time to send it over to have it all synced up, then you have a better chance of all that happening. But when I do any post-editing, I check in 15-minute intervals if everything's still in sync. And if it's not in sync, then of course I'll figure out where the point is that things started to go cattywampus and make the fix there.
Alexander Knight.
So I agree with everything said so far. The only thing that I would suggest is, one thing you could do with the iPhone is use a class-compliant audio interface. So any class-compliant audio interface, run the balanced outputs from the studio monitor outputs on the back of the RodeCaster if those are not currently being used. Run that into the audio interface that's plugged into the iPhone over USB-C, and then make sure you're using something like the Blackmagic Camera app, and then have that record. That way the audio is recorded and baked into the video, and it arrives at the same time as that. Now, that won't solve the issue with the Osmo, and it doesn't appear, I don't see that it has a 3.5 millimeter line level input as well, because if it did, you could also run audio into that. Not ideal, but you may want to check, because I know some other DJI products, they sell a USB-C to 3.5 millimeter adapter. So if that accessory is compatible with that, you might have a way of actually bringing in line level audio into that as well.
Jeffrey Powers.
One more thing that you can do, and that is once you recorded the scenes, you can try and take it into something like Topaz, and then re-encode it into a specific frame rate. You might have if you have two pieces of video that are just completely unsynced, then you can match those frame rates exactly. So you can try and see if that works a little bit better. It takes a little bit more time, but in the end, you'll have something that has the exact frame rates that you might be looking for.
Courtney?
One other thing we haven't talked about is there's a thing called Tentacle that makes little timecode generators that can generate LTC timecode audio. And you'd have to make up some custom cables so you could use a Tentacle and sacrifice one of your audio tracks in each of those devices that are recording stereo to be that LTC timecode from one of the Tentacle sync generators, or basically timecode generators. And once you jam those multiple Tentacle devices together, they will run in sync for a longer period of time. They have temperature compensated crystal oscillators in them. And so then you would have to bring it into DaVinci Resolve or some editing program that can interpret the time code on an audio track as time code and apply that time code, and then keep everything in sync that way and have it automatically sync. It may still drift because the crystals that are controlling the frame rate in each of those devices, separate from that audio track, will still be drifting, but the software in DaVinci Resolve will pull it back into sync once it starts to drift out. So that's another possibility. But you do risk a couple of things. That LTC time code is like a hashy sound, like, and it can bleed over into your audio tracks and pollute them. So you got to be careful about that. And of course, you're giving up any type of stereo recording because you're giving it over to time code as an audio track.
Jeff, thank you for the question. As you found out, sync can be a big issue. Once upon a time when I was working in the broadcast industry, everybody understand that there was house sync blackburst that was set around. All the cameras figured out exactly when the vertical interval hit, and everything was able to be synchronized to that standard signal going through the entire shop. We're away from that these days. We have the great advantage of less expensive, more available equipment. It does a great job of recording and processing things, but some little areas like synchronization have suffered a little bit from that, and you buy these relatively inexpensive but still amazingly useful tools, and you don't have that system that was there in the broadcast era to keep everything marching to the same exact drummer, and it can be an issue. So good luck with getting your things solved. Hope we helped you today. Next question.
From Brian Taylor in Washington, D.C., how does one implement group or even shared Apple I.D.s or even a single Apple I.D. for many separate emails in an environment with stringent IT security requirements?
This has been an evolving thing for the last 15 years, and it is hard to manage sometimes. Jason Bache is going to help you out here.
Okay, I've got to say it depends. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish here. And there's a little bit of overlap. It's kind of like a three-way Venn diagram. And, one or more of what I'm going to say will almost certainly handle it. And which one you choose will just depend. So, you can use managed Apple IDs through business or education, Apple Business Manager or School Manager. Let's see, federation with a Microsoft Entra or Azure ID or through Google Workspace. You can actually set that up. Mobile device management can do this depending, again, upon what you're trying to share, like what the shared asset is. Of course, there's simple iCloud through or family share as a part of iCloud, but of course that means that you need to all be on the same credit card. That may or may not work. And then, of course, I don't know. I kind of lost my place. Did I mention Apple for Business? So, that is a monthly thing where basically Apple plays server and MDM, and that allows you to do the federation without really having to learn or maintain a server along those lines. So hope that helps.
Everything Jason said, I've run into. Not the big business class, which is a whole different thing. Apple Business Manager and the rest of those are tools for people managing large. It's just been what I had to realize about a decade ago was that in my dealings with Apple, my ID was very important. They don't want a single user with multiple IDs, and they are very security conscious about knowing that when you log into the system, in order for all their security stuff to work, they really have to be able to tie you to your signal coming into the system in a practical way. Credit card use is one of those things. I mean, it's incredibly useful to be able to take your Apple Wallet and know that it's going to be on your watch and your phone and your computers, and it's all going to be two-factor authenticated with biometrics. And even if you lose your watch, somebody's not going to be able to use it to suddenly run up your credit cards and things like that. But the other side of that is that they're very strict about managing those Apple IDs, and they don't really want you to have 6 or 7 of them floating around. They want you to have one central point that they can help you manage in terms of all these security features. So it's a challenging thing. And I remember there was one circumstance. I had an account that I used for buying my son music when he was growing up. And eventually I said, hey, I'd like to get all those things. He's gone away to college. He's not using them. I want to get all those songs I bought from him, and I want to just combine everything into one library. Turned out to be impossible. I couldn't get through to the back end of Apple in such a way that they could take his ID and meld it with my ID. And it was one of my first welcome wake-up calls to the fact that ID management in the modern era is very important. Jason Bache, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, David Brady mentioned something that I should at least mention because there are a lot of it depends here. Again, it depends on what you're trying to do. David Brady in the chat mentioned Jamf, JAMF.com. That is if you want to manage Macs, not share the assets of an Apple credential. But I'm sure that, they can do any which way of such things. Just understand it's per unit per month, and that can get expensive.
Absolutely. Jeffrey, next question.
This one is from Jeffrey Powers in Madison, Wisconsin, USA. From here on the panel, let's talk continuity with AI video trying to focus on faces. I've seen background detail change or people morphing. How can a prompt be structured to keep the background similar?
Courtney Gooden's going to give us some suggestions here. Courtney?
2 words, nano banana. This is the new darling of consistency in the AI world of image generation and consistency between prompts. So, taking an existing image and changing something within that image by entering a prompt like, make the background a jungle, or add more people to the background, remove people from the background, etc. And Matt Wolf, who is the proprietor of FutureTools.io, has come up with a video that I looked at last night that's very informative on Nano Banana. And it's called 50 Insane Ways to Use Nano Banana for Free, which is the new Google's AI model that lets you modify existing images. And he has this, and it's very carefully laid out. And you can see it has great bookmarks in here, and you can kind of scroll through the timeline and put yourself in a wanted poster, change the style of an image, there's all these different categories of, change the contents of a billboard so that everything remains exactly the same. And he demonstrates how you can change just one thing using this new tool, Gemini Image 2.5, I think it's called. Sometimes known as Nano Banana. How to put your logo into something and keep the background the same. How to change, for example, the background and keep the person in the foreground exactly the same. So this new model from Google is extremely consistent for doing editing and changing to an image and keeping consistency across those different variations. And it is the winner on all the leaderboards as far as consistency goes in the latest AI tools out there.
Jeffrey Powers.
So, that is true with the images. I'm talking more on the video, and I'm talking more on the fact of using AI video when it comes to making movies. I don't know if you've seen these on Facebook. I'm calling them respect videos because they end up with the main thumbnail with the text respect on it. And it's just basically silly things like this bus driver sees this woman drop a bag of oranges, and then he goes and helps her onto the bus. And it's all AI created. And they're doing a great job with the faces and keeping the consistency on the faces. But then when you start looking at the backgrounds, that's where everything kind of falls apart. There was another one where somebody was helping a person in a wheelchair up an escalator, which you shouldn't do because they should be taking the elevator. But the background, the funny thing about that was this was in a mall, and in the background, the shops kept changing their names during each scene. So that's where I was going on this. How can we create a prompt that will actually help the whole scene rather than just what's in the foreground?
Courtney, you wanted to come back in?
Yeah, I was going to let Jeffrey know that if you look at that tutorial, they go into also using, although the Nano Banana is primarily for still image editing, they do cover the ability to get the image the way you want it, and then take that image, resultant image, once you change all the background, et cetera, to be exactly how you want it, into Runway or into Veo 3, and have it generate moving video from that still image. And that way you can maintain consistency. If you can generate multiple stills from different angles, let's say, of your scene, and it'll maintain the consistency behind. And then you can bring each of those stills into a program like Runway or any of the still image to video type of AI devices to maintain consistency across cuts, so that you can maintain character consistency and background consistency and props on the table, things like that. by using Nano Banana to make the changes and change the camera perspective, and then bring each of those stills of the different perspectives into Runway to make them into video, or Veo 3.
If you have questions that you want to put into the show queue, you can also type askofficehours.global into your web browser. That's askofficehours.global. I've just tossed up the QR code that takes you to the same place. So if you're watching the show and you suddenly think, wow, I need to ask a question about that topic really quickly, this is the fastest way to get into the system. Somebody on the back end will take a look at them as they come in. If you're trying to make your question well-formed, simple, address one point at a time. But if you need to get something in quick, this is the quickest way to do that. Again, it's askofficehours.global, and you can submit your questions into the show. Let's go to our next question.
Adi Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida, USA is asking, thoughts on Beeble Camera?
I don't think I've heard of that. Guy Cochran, are you familiar with the Beeble Camera?
Not that much, but it reminds me of a booth that Jeffrey and I stopped by at NAB a couple of years back called Skyglass. They didn't wind up making it, but this was the same type of thing where you have an app and it allows you to upload a USDZ asset. And in this example on their website, basically what you're doing is you're using the depth information of the camera. So it's an app that when you start shooting, you have this opportunity to load a background, like this one's and I just downloaded the app while we were doing some of the other questions to try this out. Basically, in my room here, when I loaded this background, I was able to put myself into this subway, and it's pretty cool the way that it does allow you to previs or get some great ideas, because you can upload your own asset in that background and have your own green screen. But to me, the quality, of course, isn't there. But this gives you some ideas if you want to pitch something to a client. This would be a great app to be like, all right, we're going to start in the Olympics in France, and here's what that background looks like, and then we're going to go here and we're going to go there, and it just gives you an idea of what lenses to use, lighting, things like that. So it's a cool app to play with. You could go on the App Store, and it's Beeble.ai.
Next question.
This one is from Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. How realistically does Izoptope Vinyl simulate the dust, scratches, warp, and mechanical noise of beloved vinyl records?
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at this because I grew up in the era of vinyl records, and it was like, gosh, I don't want any of that stuff, but now they're bringing it back for nostalgia. Courtney Gooden, what say you?
Yeah, I want to accurately reproduce the sounds of my eyes rolling, when I hear it. Because, we worked, for years, audiophiles were working for the holy grail of 20 to 20,000 and how to eliminate, record rumble and wow and flutter and all the mysterious problems that we had with analog audio. And now, of course, that we've been able to have, you can take a $4 chip and perfectly record any audio sound up to 40,000 hertz, way beyond the ability of human hearing, with no noise, no warp, no flutter, no scratches or pops. And so we're adding all that stuff back in. This is well, I see why it's free, because you wouldn't want to pay to degrade your audio tracks to make them sound like, to add, turntable rumble. And I wonder if it's so esoteric that it can emulate the difference between idler wheel rumble on a turntable and belt drive rumble. I wonder about that. And whether the scratches, can you control the impulse strength of those pops and scratches to be, if it's a scratch, it'll repeat every third of a second, because at 33 RPMs, that scratch is going to come around again. If it's longer, if it's longitudinal, if it's not longitudinal, it goes across the track. So we pop, pop, pop. And if it's a scratch that comes from queuing the record up from a DJ, it's the very first 10 seconds of the track. So there's all this esoteric noise you could add back in for the purist who really wants to be accurate in the sounds of the past.
I love the fact that during your little Zoom cut it out for me.
and say, hey,
You
we
may
don't
put
want
all
any
this
of that
stuff back
noise
in.
here. Yeah.
The algorithms may take it right back out. Jason
I should've
Bates, your
turned it
thoughts?
Yeah, surveys in at least 9 out of 10 vinyl records appear to report that they have been accurately represented. So the answer is yes, as accurately as it can be. And, Courtney was making fun of it. I actually have used this, and they have since turned it way crazier. So you can have vinyl from the 30s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 2000s. You can also change where the arm is because, of course, that pop may actually be a little bit different if you've got a little bit different drag depending upon where the needle is on the vinyl. So the answer is more accurately than anyone should have ever done.
I love it. This is a great discussion. Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything. I used the vinyl once for something about a while ago, and the whole point is that I was pretty impressed with what it came up with, but it's really all about how it's consistent. Can you start to hear, if you listen to this thing again and again, can you start to hear that this is just a sample of a scratch that will repeat, and then you hear that little bip in between the two parts or anything like that. Or with the scratch, as Courtney said, how consistent, because you have the scratch that goes across the vinyl, and then you have the scratch that goes askew of the vinyl, so it wouldn't do that whole 33. It would be just slightly after the 33 each time. So how drilled down can you get with that? And for the most part, a lot of people probably aren't looking for that type of accuracy. They just want to create a lo-fi beat that has a little vinyl scratch to it, and it's going to be perfect for things like that.
This is an emotional thing, and I honor this. I'm not laughing at actually the question or the discussion because I think it is important. I remember when I was on turntables and somebody posted, who was it? Vic Hernandez says, I miss my belt drive dual turntable. That's an emotional thing, and it is true. And I remember thinking, because somebody had told me about the fact that a diamond needle, or a sapphire or whatever, going through a vinyl record, there's a potential to knock off like high frequency peaks and things like that. So I remember somebody telling me you will never hear it exactly the way it sounded the first time you played that virgin vinyl record that you brought from the record store. So I was always cognizant of the fact that every time I listened to one of my favorite records, I was making it a tiny bit worse. Does that matter? I don't think so. Because the experience of running into new music, something that was really brilliant, that all my friends were talking about, and that I was able to put my COS headphones on and put the record on my dual turntable and go through my Marantz amp and sit on my couch in my first apartment and really enjoy the professionalism and the brilliance of those musicians of that era. There was a very big emotional component, and there still is. So I can see people wanting to recapture that. Is it, you're not going after precision. You're going after a feeling, an era, a something you lived through and trying to recapture. And I got to say, I honor that. So all the engineers who have put these things back in, God bless you. I hope it turns out to be as satisfying as that moment I listened to those first records the first time. Let's go to the next question.
This one comes from Tommy Johnson, St. Paul, Minnesota, USA. Waves has a buy two, get two free sale going on. I'm getting the WLM meters. What other 3 must-have plugins should I consider?
Alexander Knight, what do you think?
Oh man, they've got hundreds of plugins. I can't decide. Okay, I'll mention a couple. I would suggest the SSL E-channel strip, and also as a really cool channel strip, you should really check out the Shep's Omni channel. That's probably one of my favorites. It's some very unique design elements in the fact that you can drag and drop and change the order of the chain in processing. So I would really look at those two, but those are pretty fantastic. Too many others. I can only give you 2 off the top of my head.
Jeffrey Powers.
I'm going to give you a big warning on Waves. I'm not a fan of Waves. I had Waves destroy a few of my productions because of the fact of their licensing practices. So if you buy Waves, like for instance, if you buy the WLM meters or anything like that, it basically, the license attaches to the MAC address on the computer that you install it on. And if you want to switch it over to another computer, you get one opportunity a year to change that MAC address over. I go between 3-4 different machines when I do production. So I want to have WLM meters here, and then I want to have it here. They're never running at the same time on the two computers, but I've had, like, basically what happens is if it doesn't know the license, it will put a skip, a small little audio skip into your production, and then of course that's completely ruined your production. So I would highly recommend to look at that and see if that's something that you can handle, because if not, then yeah, you could definitely be having what I had, and that is a production that was completely wasted, or a lot of editing to try and take out those little itty bitty blips.
Jason Beish.
Does Waves still work with iLock, the license manager? That's a straight up question. I remember that actually working and allowing it to move. I'm sure that they've moved away from that. And if it does in fact bond to the MAC address, the machine access code, the network port of the computer that's initially installed on, my immediate thought would be disable that network card and plug like a Thunderbolt dock in and let it attach to a dock that I can move between devices.
Alexander Knight, you wanted to come back in on this?
Yeah, so Waves has their Wave Central app for managing software installs and licenses, and yes, it does work with iLock, but I actually find the best way to move stuff is to actually use a USB dongle. So the moment I moved all my licenses to a USB dongle, it makes it way easier to move back and forth between a couple of different computers. I personally haven't had an issue. I'm sorry, Jeffrey, that you had so many issues. My experience over the last 20 years has been quite good, personally, but that's me.
Let's go to the next question.
This one is from Omar Gadan in Orange County, California. Ran out of space in my 10U rack that I bring on mobile productions. Should I move to a 20U single column ATA style shock mount road case, or a 12U plus 12U side by side table height road case? Pitfalls to be aware of.
Jason Beish.
I'm going to answer your question with a question. Do you enjoy loading a 20U rack in and out of wherever you are? And if you do, then you must be a glutton for punishment. Modularity is your friend here. I think you should actually just buy it in the smallest, conceivable block, and then set up the blocks to be, things that are designed to kind of stack on top of or next to each other and have bespoke uses. That's the way it's always worked really well for me.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, as Jason said, it's one of those things where if you spend a lot of time going to venues and loading in and loading out, especially late at night and early in the morning and going down halls of venues, it's like, do you need a two-man role on this thing because you're going through elevators and whatnot? What makes life easy? And I know, Omar, you've gone to some of these shows like Cinegear where we got to see Make Your Cart Go, where you could throw items on. Let me pull up there. Actually, let me first pull up this rack. So this is a little bit higher rack, and one of the downsides to loading in on a ramp is that this thing becomes top heavy. So we do have quite a bit of setup, so we load in this thing. I think it's a 20 or 24U, and then we have to hook up our external recorders and whatnot. Even though there's a bunch of hyperdecks in there, we still do some ISO records on these Sumos. But here's the Make Your Cart Go, which basically adds powered wheels. What Omar's talking about is more like something what we see our friend Noah Sargent has in LA. And we did an episode on Extra Hours a couple weeks ago where Noah came on and talked about the build of his cart, which actually has more like this kind of displays on the top, and then you've got your equipment down below, and then you've got pull-out shelves. These are convenient and they're nice, but again, it's the load in, load out. If you have multiple people that can help you, wheel this thing that can get 400, 500, 600, 700 pounds, it's definitely tough to get up and down ramps unless you have a lift gate or something like that. So just it all depends on how much of these that you're doing consistently, because some gear you want to leave in, some you might want to pull out. If you've, like this company that I work with here locally, we have two of everything. So we have two constellations, we have a set of hyperdecks, PTZ cameras all doubled up, so we can go on location or in the studio and everything's doubled, and we're not re-racking things for every build. So consistency is key, on these, where ideally you're not having to pull stuff in and pull stuff out. And don't forget convenience panels. Those are the holy grail, so you're not damaging any of your devices as you're putting cables in, pulling cables out.
Courtney?
Yeah, all good points. And the thing to think of, if you're doing live shows, I always like to maintain actual line of sight to the stage, so that you can catch things like, oh, the guy's on the wrong mic, and you can't figure out why you can't, you faded up the main mic, but oh, wait, he's grabbed a hand mic from somewhere else. So you have to maintain some kind of line of sight. If you surround yourself with these giant racks of equipment, you're blocking your view of the stage or the front of house. So that's a consideration. The other consideration is the laws of physics, like Guy was pointing out. You can put all that stuff in one big case, but then when it weighs 700 pounds and you get to the venue and you've got little 3-inch casters in the bottom of it, and you realize the floor is covered with cables. How am I going to get over all of these cables? They're all over the place. You're going to have somebody help you lift that 700-pound case over every single cable that is laying on the floor between where you are and where you need to be. So if the more the weight, the more is in a rack, the bigger the wheels you have to have. And if you're shipping by air, that's another consideration. The more weight you put inside the case, the more shock mounting you need, because when that case falls off the baggage belt at about 12 feet and hits the tarmac, the momentum of all that weight in that rack is going to peel everything out of the inside of that rack, unless it's heavily shock mounted in the cases that you described that have the rubber shock mounts at all 8 corners of the rack internally in that ATA rated case. So that makes the case a lot bigger than it needs to be. So I go by a lot of smaller, maybe 6U cases that have things that need to plug into each other in each of the 6Us, and then ways to go from one of those 6Us to the next 6Us on interconnects where you need to interconnect those two. And that way you can arrange them horizontally. You need more table space to lay them out, but you can see over them. It makes everything reachable at a single arm distance, and you're not having to do this, which can get old, reaching up. I got bursitis from working radio with cart machines above my head. It made me a cripple for many years after that.
Let's see if we can sneak one more in. Next question.
This is a QR code question coming in from Nicholas McKinney in Johnson City, Tennessee. What software-based broadcast system does the panel prefer? I currently have an ATEM Mini Extreme Iso and an M4 Mac Mini. I've used softwares like OBS, Ecamm Live, and I'm currently using Mimo Live. What would the panel prefer?
Jeffrey Powers raised his hand for this one. Jeffrey?
All of them are good. It's really more of a question of what you're doing by bringing it into the Mac and using this external software. Are you using it just to stream out? Are you putting some external bugs, like a live bug or something like that, on there so it passes through and goes out? I'm assuming you're recording from the ISO, so you don't have to worry about that part. But all 3 of them work. It's all about how much you want to pay for that. And of course, OBS being the free option, it's also going to be, if you're looking for the highest quality, it's probably not going to be your best option. And then Mimo Live or Ecamm, I would choose Mimo Live over Ecamm in that case. But yeah, I think you're right on the right track.
Thank you all. Muted or not.
Muted,
there we go. Now I can hear myself. I'm not muted. Thank you for all your questions. As always, we can't do this show without at least 3 groups of constituents. Our producers, those of you who put questions into the show and are watching for the answers. Without you, this show doesn't make any sense. So thank you for contributing. Thank you for being a part of the Office Hours family. To the panelists who show up every day to add their expertise and answer questions for people and really share the hard-fought knowledge of years in the trenches doing this kind of work. Thank you guys very, very much. And everybody else who's been a panelist over the course of the show history. And to the amazing back-end crew, those people who are quietly sitting there punching buttons and doing 100 other jobs you can't imagine. There's always room for volunteers here, and It's a great place to learn about the changing face of the production industry, as we are always going through rapid upheaval, and the jobs of today will not always necessarily be the jobs of tomorrow. And this is one of the few places you can go and find out all about all of that stuff for free. Our Teluk traversal today, 17,000 miles. That is 28,000 kilometers, 136 million bananas for scale. It is Thursday. That means the Rundown with David Paskin is tonight, so check it out. And we will all be back doing exactly the same thing tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
Is that a nano banana?
Nano banana!
Next stop, Pico Banana.
Pico banana, much smaller.
Much smaller.
How
Yeah,
many
17,000 bananas is how many nano bananas? Somebody do the math.
Many.
But they'll be consistent.
Never put many on the multiple choice math test.
All of the above.
All of the above. Yeah, that's it. Remember, when putting together cases, the bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Just never let me use my bead frame either. I was really upset. I said, can't I have a calculator? Can I have a bead frame?
Let's talk about heavy case momentum and steep ramps.
Let's not.
Learn the laws of physics before you design cases. Yes.
I particularly like your comment, Guy. Depends on whether you have a lift gate or not.
No, depends. And yeah, it depends on if lift and gate